Welcome back to part 3 of the lecture on visual pathways and also on focus and emphasis. So let's think about how how we're creating focus in a painting like this, right? Through attention, through detail, through change of light, the amount of light, the lighter values, the contrast, right? The increased value contrast in this sort of area, as well as through color. And then how are we creating dominance? Um, like a good example would be that this large shape doesn't really have much in the way of focus or attention, but it has a certain amount of dominance because of the way it's kind of pushed towards us and its scale. Uh, so, and then also let's just pause for a moment and think about this painting as if from the point of view of a photographer, and think about how the artist is purposefully creating areas of de-emphasis, almost like the way a photographer would use depth of field to get us to not see certain things or not pay attention very much to certain things. Look at how all of these passages are painted a certain way to emphasize or to to de-emphasize, to convince us that we don't need to pay that much attention to it. And once you start looking at paintings and artworks, whether it's a photograph or painting or print this way, you can really start to see how much is organized that way, how much the crispness of value and light draws our attention here, but also the crispness of detail and all these thin lines, and just the really intricate, how this elbow pointing towards us, or the creases on this face, how those are the moments that really draw our attention right away. And then how other areas, as they move into darkness and for other reasons, have less information on them, and therefore we put a little bit less attention to them. I wanted to do a page on Andy Goldsworthy just to talk about other ways of creating dominance and emphasis, and ways of directing our eye, because it's very much a part of his work. Think about in both of these paintings how we are creating emphasis and focus. In this case, the emphasis and focus is very much based on just the amount of time and attention that goes into this area, all the different steps, all the thousands and thousands of marks that are here compared to much more looser, much less attention to other areas. And you could see the same thing in a much more open kind of, less monomaniacal kind of approach, but like this meandering change in attention from some areas getting less attention to other areas getting a little bit more, and it's not always just being a change about from a thing to another thing. Sometimes areas that are kind of hard to figure out what we're looking at get a lot of specific attention. Here's another good set of examples and comparisons. And in the Hans Hofmann here, you can really think about the difference between dominance versus focus and emphasis, right? Like the focus and emphasis can be a lot about these kind of moments and where there's a lot of attention, but the dominance is very much about these clean, clear shapes, and they very much dominate the picture. But then as our eye searches for more and more to look at, we love to find like these kind of moments. Or another way, think about how there's a lot of dominance and attention to Christ, but then this big shape of this cloth is also dominant, even though it doesn't have nearly as much focus or emphasis as Christ and the sheet that he's on does. And so you can see that same effect, and think about how this also goes back to the first part of the lecture about visual pathways, and think about the way our eye moves through and how the artist is thinking about our eye moving through the composition, and how that relates to hierarchy and emphasis, and how that relates to focus and dominance, and how that relates to geometric structure. All of those things work together to really kind of help an artist kind of organize the way we're going to read a picture, and how comfortably and how clearly we can feel like we can move through it. Okay, that's the end. On to the